Let me tell you something right now. In 30 years between family court in Manhattan and this televised arbitration bench, I have heard every excuse ever invented by the human mind. My dog ate the lease. My landlord is psychic. The light was yellow. It's always yellow. I've heard them all. So when a young man walked into my courtroom with 4 unpaid parking tickets totaling $620 and the energy of someone who genuinely did not want to be here, I was prepared. I was locked and loaded. And if you think you know where this story is going, subscribe right now, because I promise you, you don't. This case broke every pattern I thought I knew. And the way it ended, I still think about it. Hit that like button if you believe that real justice means knowing when to be hard and when to be human. Now let's get into it. The young man's name was Marcus, 21 years old, a junior at a state university about 3 hours from the city. He came in wearing a dark blue hoodie, the kind college kids wear when they haven't slept in 2 days, sneakers, a backpack that looked like it had been through a semester and a half of pure survival. He wasn't cocky, he wasn't hostile, he just looked depleted, like someone had reached inside him and turned off a light. I've been on this bench long enough to read a room in the first 30 seconds. The bailiff, Officer Raymond, a solid 20-year veteran who has seen everything I've seen and maybe a few things I haven't, he gave me one of those looks when Marcus walked in. Not a smirk, not an eye roll. Just a quiet, pay attention to this one kind of look. I noted it. The clerk handed me the file, 4 parking tickets, all in the same 2-week window, 2 in front of the university hospital, 1 near the campus library, 1 near what the filing paperwork described as a residential address, a small apartment complex about 6 blocks from campus, $620, and Marcus had ignored every single notice. That's why we were here. Ignoring notices is what gets people in front of me, and I have zero sympathy for that under normal circumstances. Zero. I looked at him and said, Mr. Marcus, you received 4 parking tickets over approximately 14 days. You were notified 3 times by mail and once by a certified letter that required your signature, and you appeared for none of the scheduled hearings until today. Is that correct? He looked straight at me. No fidgeting, no fake outrage. He said, yes, ma'am. Now, that right there told me something. Most people who come in with unpaid tickets and missed hearings start performing immediately. They tell me how busy they are, how unfair it all is, how the meter was broken, how they didn't see the sign. They come in rehearsed. Marcus didn't perform. He just confirmed the facts. I made a mental note. Tell me why, I said. He was quiet for a second. Not the kind of quiet that means someone is about to manufacture a story. The kind of quiet that means the truth is heavy and they're figuring out how to carry it across the room. My father passed away, he said. 6 weeks ago, I was back and forth between school and home for about 3 weeks. I wasn't really keeping up with anything. If you've been watching this channel for any length of time, you know my position on sob stories. My position is that I've heard them all. My position is that grief is real, but it is also the single most commonly weaponized emotion in a courtroom. People cry on cue. People fabricate loss. People use death the way other people use traffic, as a universal excuse for not doing what they were supposed to do. So no, I did not immediately soften. Because here's the thing. If I had softened at the mention of grief, I would not be doing my job. I would be a therapist, and I am not a therapist. Share this video right now if you know someone who thinks a good story gets you out of every consequence, because I'm about to show you what actually matters. I looked at Marcus and I said, I'm very sorry for your loss. Now let me ask you a question. Where did your father pass away? In the hospital, he said. Which hospital? He named the university hospital, the same hospital that 2 of those parking tickets were written in front of. I leaned forward slightly. I am known for a very particular kind of stillness on this bench. When I lean forward, it is not an accident. It means my brain just caught something. The university hospital, I said. The same hospital where 2 of your 4 tickets were issued? Yes, ma'am. How many times were you at the hospital during that 2-week period? Almost every day, he said. My dad was in the ICU. My mom doesn't drive. I was the one bringing her back and forth. I was parking wherever I could find a space because I was trying to get her inside as fast as possible. I paused. I am not going to tell you I felt nothing. I am going to tell you that what I felt did not immediately change anything, because feeling something and ruling on something are 2 entirely different exercises, and this bench has never confused them. Do you have any documentation? I asked. Hospital records, admission dates, anything that establishes your father was in that hospital during the period these tickets were written? He reached into his backpack. He pulled out a manila envelope, the kind you hold important papers in when you know you need them. He walked it to the clerk. He didn't hesitate. He didn't say, "I didn't bring anything." He came prepared. That mattered to me. The clerk opened it and slid me the contents. I looked at them carefully. Admission records for his father, admitted to the University Hospital ICU 14 days before the first ticket was written, date of death, 11 days after the last ticket was written, a printed hospital parking notice warning that the surrounding streets had active enforcement during high visitor periods. The dates matched, every single one. I looked up at Marcus. He was watching me read, not with desperation, not performing, just watching, the way someone watches who has told the truth and is waiting to see if it's enough. I said nothing for a moment. Then I said, "Before I tell you what I decided, I want to address something. Subscribe now if you want to see what happens when truth actually walks into a courtroom and has to stand on its own 2 feet, because this is where it gets real. Because here is my problem. My problem was not Marcus. My problem was the system. See, those tickets were valid. The parking enforcement officers were doing their jobs. The notices were sent to his college address, which was correct because that was his address of record. He received certified mail, which he signed for, according to the paperwork, on a day that I now knew he had likely spent in a hospital waiting room. I am an arbitration judge. I work within specific rules. I cannot simply wave a magic wand and erase a city's parking citations because someone's story is sad. If I did that, this whole system becomes a performance. Whoever cries the best wins. That's not justice. That is a talent competition. But what I can do, and what I am trained to do, is weigh the totality of circumstances when determining whether a good faith hardship warrants modification of outcome. And let me be direct about what I was weighing. 1, the facts were verifiable and verified. The documentation was real. The timeline matched. He hadn't come in here with a note scribbled on a napkin and a sob story. He came in with documentation. 2, he had not ignored those tickets out of arrogance or negligence in the traditional sense. He had ignored them because he was watching his father die in an ICU while simultaneously trying to keep his mother functional, and he had done it alone. 3, and this was the thing that no one in that room said out loud, but everyone felt, he was 21 years old. He had parked his car in front of that hospital over and over again because he was a child trying to do an adult job, trying to be the man his father was no longer there to be. The bailiff was very still. The clerk had set down her pen. "Mr. Marcus," I said, "how is your mother doing?" He blinked. He hadn't expected that question. She's hanging in there," he said. "I went back to school because she told me to. She said my dad would have wanted me to finish." I looked at him for a long moment, and then I said, "Is she right?" And this young man, this 21-year-old in a worn blue hoodie who had been carrying the weight of the whole world on his shoulders, his jaw tightened, not with grief, with something closer to determination. And he said, "Yes, ma'am, she's right. Hit that like button right now." Because that answer, that one answer, told me everything about who Marcus was. Now, here is where I have to be clear about something because this is important. I did not dismiss those tickets because Marcus made me feel sympathetic. I did not dismiss those tickets because his story was sad. Sad stories fill my courtroom every single day. I dismissed those tickets because the evidence supported a finding that the circumstances under which they were incurred constituted an extraordinary hardship that was documented, verifiable, and consistent with every fact in this file. That is a legal and equitable standard, and Marcus met it. But before I got to my ruling, I had one more thing to address, because in this file, tucked between the certified mail receipt and the city's response form, there was something I had not mentioned yet. Something that had been nagging at me since the clerk first handed me the paperwork. The parking enforcement officer who had written 2 of the 4 tickets, the 2 in front of the hospital, had included a handwritten note in the file. A note that said, and I'm reading directly, "Driver observed distressed. Vehicle noted multiple times over 7 days, same location. Recommends supervisory review of circumstances before judgment." That officer had seen Marcus, had watched him park, rush out of the car, support his mother through the hospital entrance, had watched it happen multiple times, and had done something that parking officers are not formally trained to do and not formally required to do. That officer had taken 30 extra seconds to write a note that said, "There is more to this story." I looked up at the gallery. I rarely addressed the gallery directly, but I looked up and I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Someone did their job with their eyes and their conscience open. That matters." The room was very quiet. I'm going to tell you what I did not expect to feel in that moment. I did not expect to feel what I would describe with some professional embarrassment as something close to pride, not in Marcus, though he earned that too, but in that anonymous officer who had never met Marcus, who had no obligation to write that note, and who had written it anyway, because they knew that the law without humanity is just machinery, and machinery doesn't have a conscience. Now, before I tell you the ruling, leave a comment below. Tell me what you would have done. Would you have dismissed those tickets, split them, required community service? I read every comment on this channel, and I want to know how you see this case. Justice is not always obvious. That is why we talk about it. I looked at Marcus and I said, "I'm going to dismiss all 4 citations." He blinked. He said, "All of them?" I said, "I'm speaking. All 4. The documentation you provided establishes that the circumstances under which these violations occurred fall within an equitable hardship exception. The timeline is verified. The hospital records are consistent. The parking officer's notes corroborate your account." I paused. "You came prepared, you told the truth, and you did not waste my time. That matters." He exhaled, this slow, full exhale, like he had been holding his breath since his father died. And here is the part that was not on camera. Here is the part I am going to tell you because you deserve to know what real courts look like when nobody is performing. I stepped down from the bench. I am not a physically demonstrative person. People who have appeared before me in 30 years on the bench will confirm this. I do not hug defendants. I do not pat people on the back. I maintain a clear professional line because that line is important. It protects the integrity of the process, and it protects the dignity of everyone in the room. But Marcus was standing there at 21 years old with $620 he didn't have to pay anymore, and he looked like a kid who had not been told once in 6 weeks that he was going to be okay. I stepped down, and I put my hand on his shoulder, and I said, quietly, just to him, "Go finish school. Your father was right to want that for you." He nodded. He couldn't speak. The bailiff looked at the ceiling. The clerk pretended to be very busy with her papers. I walked back to the bench, straightened my robe, and called the next case. Subscribe to this channel right now, because what I'm about to tell you next is the lesson that I have carried from that case every single day since it happened. Justice, real justice, is not blind. That phrase, Lady Justice with a blindfold, I understand its meaning. Impartiality, equal treatment, no favors. All of that is right and necessary. But here's what that phrase leaves out. Justice requires sight. It requires you to actually look at what is in front of you, to look at the evidence and the person and the context together, not to be manipulated by emotion, but to be informed by it when the facts support it. Marcus did not come into my courtroom asking for mercy. He came in with documentation and the truth. He didn't perform grief. He prepared for court. That is the difference between someone manipulating a system and someone deserving of a fair outcome within it. I've seen people come in here with real grief and use it as a shield to avoid every reasonable consequence in their lives. I've dismissed those cases firmly because the facts didn't support the claim. And I've seen people come in with documented hardship, behaving with dignity, and I have adjusted my rulings accordingly, because that is what the law allows and what fairness demands. Let me tell you something I tell every young person I meet. The world does not owe you grace, but it owes you fairness. And the fastest way to get fairness, in a courtroom or anywhere else, is to show up, tell the truth, bring your paperwork, and do not waste the other person's time. That is what Marcus did. And that is why Marcus walked out of my courtroom that day without a single dollar owed. About 3 months after the case, I received a letter, forwarded through the production office. It was from Marcus, short, typewritten on what I suspect was a campus library computer. He said he was doing okay. His grades had slipped, but he was pulling them back up. His mother had started attending a grief support group at their church. He said he thought about the courtroom sometimes, not the ruling exactly, more the feeling of having someone look at the facts and trust the truth when he told it. He said, and I'm going to quote this directly because I've thought about it more than once, "I didn't know the law could feel like that. I've been doing this for a long time. I've heard a lot of things in a lot of rooms." That sentence sat with me. I didn't know the law could feel like that. Well, it can. When people tell the truth and the facts are clear and the judge is paying attention and some anonymous parking enforcement officer, took 30 extra seconds to write a note because their conscience told them to. When all of those things come together, the law can feel like exactly what it was always supposed to be. Not perfect, not always fast, not always warm, but fair, honest, earned. Tell me in the comments what this case means to you. Have you ever been in a situation where you needed someone to look at the full picture, not just the surface? Leave your story below. I read this channel because the people watching it are exactly the kind of people who understand what fairness actually costs. And share this video right now, because somewhere out there is a 21-year-old in a blue hoodie carrying something too heavy for one person, and they need to know that truth still counts for something in this world. That showing up, telling the truth, and bringing your documentation can still make a difference. That the system, when it works the way it is supposed to work, can see them. This was one of the most straightforward cases I ever ruled on. Not because the answer was easy, it wasn't. I sat with every angle of it. I weighed the competing considerations. I did my job. But once the facts were laid out, once I looked at that hospital admission date and that parking officer's handwritten note and that young man who had carried his mother through an ICU every day without asking for a single thing except a parking space close enough to run from, the ruling was clear. The truth was clear. And in 30 years, on 2 different benches, that is the thing that still gets me. Not the complicated cases, not the ones where I had to untangle deliberate fraud or brilliant manipulation. The ones that stay with me are the ones where someone told the plain, simple truth, backed it up with facts, and trusted that fairness was still possible. Those are the ones I remember, but nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what walked into my courtroom next week.